All right. So the last one we're going to do is I wanted to do something that is clearly one that has to do with the two-tail test. That way you can see the three of them. So we're going to look at question 9. Um, question 9 says, according to a study by the American Pet Food Dealers Association, 3% of U.S. adults or U.S. household own pets. So it's straightforward, saying 3% of U.S. own pets. And so in that scenario, you can see that your p hat will be what? 3%. A report is being prepared by an editorial in an LA Chronicle. As part of the editorial, a random sample of 300, so you can see 300 people, okay, showed that, so out of 300 people, they now found that 210 own pets. So from that sample, those who own pets would be what? Your X. Because remember, X stands for your number of success. In this case, we're looking at people who own pets, right? So the next thing we'll ask is, does this data disagree with the Pets Food Dealers Association data? Use level sequence of 5%. All right. So remember, so just to kind of go back to what we did a couple of weeks ago, if you're given a question about a population in terms of a proportion, right? In this case, we are assuming that it's 3%. So we're giving that. But remember, you sampled about 300 households, another 300 households, 210 say, hey, we own pets. So to find the population proportion or the sample proportion, it's going to be your X over N. In this case, it's going to be 210 over what? 300. That's how you find your sample proportion. So in this scenario, we're going to do the same thing. To find our sample proportion will now be equal to, right, or 210 divided by what? 300. And that is the sample proportion. Now, remember, right, for us to start, we always want to check our N times P and N times Q and make sure that we're getting at least 5. And so in this case, it's going to be equal to our N times our P, and that's equal to our N times our, well, we didn't do our Q. Great catch. So let's go to our Q. That will equal to 1 minus our P, right? So now we can do our Q. That'll be equal to N times our Q. In both cases, we can see the numbers are at least 5. So we're good on those two, right? So now let's set up our H1, HA. But if you look at the question, right, H sub O and H sub A, my bad. So it says, does the data disagree? So in this case, you are saying disagree or agree. And so when you have that scenario, you know clearly that it's going to be, because remember, H sub O is always going to be greater or equal to, less or equal to, H sub A, would just basically the opposites, right? So when it says disagree or agree, because it says 63% off, it didn't say greater than or less than, and so you know this is a straightforward case of equality, right? And so we now say HO or H sub O, population proportion is equal to 63%. And then A sub A is gonna, it's not equal, right? It's not equal. So that's what they're trying to do, right? So do you have, if you, so what the company is saying is H sub O. If I am able to disprove this, or to reject H sub O, then I'm disagreeing with the data. So if we agree with this, then we disagree with the data, right? Because that's what the company is saying. Also, that's what the Pets Association is saying. So if we fail to reject H sub O, then we're agreeing with them. If we reject it, H sub O, then we disagree with the data. So that's what they're asking us to do here. So you can see that this clearly is a two-tailed test, right? And so we're dealing with a two-tailed test scenario. All right. So to find our test statistic, right? Remember our formula, right, is going to be a p hat minus a p over the square root of pq over n, right? So the same thing we're going to do. So we're going to look at our p hat minus, right, p close parentheses for the square root. The square root is going to be our p times our q divided by our n. We'll close that, right? And so we get our test stat as 2.5, right? So now we need to find our critical value. But remember, right, this is a two-tailed test. So we need to find it from the left side, and we also need to find it from the right side. Right, so we're finding it from both sides. Now, remember how we do it, right? Because our level sequence is 0.05, right? It's giving us 0.05. But if you remember what I told you all, is that in actuality, if it's 0.05, that means that's 95%, right? That means that here you're having half of this and half of this, right? So this is going to be 2.5 and this is 2.5. So what you're trying to find here is, is this area and it's this area. So this area here is actually 2.5, right? But this area here, see where it says 2.5? It's going to be 1 minus what? 2.5, which is what? 0.975. So that's actually what you're comparing. So you're comparing, here is going to be 0.05 divided by 2, right? So you're comparing 0.025 and 1 minus this, right? So those are the two ends that you're comparing, this end and this one, right? Because everything here, you're rejecting A sub O, you're rejecting A sub O. Here, you're failing to reject. So all we just need to know is to find out what's the Z value here and what's the Z value here. All right, or critical value here, what's the critical value here and here, we're able to solve our scenario. That's what we want to find with this form, right? And so to do that, right, it'll be equal to, we'll do our norm inverse. We'll select this number, we'll do 0, we'll do 1. And so you can see, for both of them, we did both of them, right? You can see what it's telling us here is that, well, the number that you can get here is negative 1.96, and here's what? Positive 1.96. So anything to the left of this is rejected, anything to the right of this is rejected. So now we need to look at our test stat. When you look at our test stat, you can see that our test stat is what? 2.5. Right? Our test stat is 2.5, which means it falls somewhere here, right? Because this is 2.5, right? And this is our test stat. So you can see it falls in the rejection region. Since you won't have this table in the exam, right? To show me, you just say, since test stat falls in the rejection region, we reject visible. Or you can say that it falls to the right of the critical value, right? So what's the interpretation here? Now, look at it, right? We have rejected A sub O. That means that we're saying that the population proportion is not equal to 3. But the association is saying it's equal to 3. So by this solution, we are basically rejecting or disagreeing with the data. So it says, does this data disagree with the PET food association? Yes, right? So at 5% level of significance, we have sufficient evidence to disagree with the data provided by the pet food dealers association, right? And that's because you can see we rejected A sub O, which is this is what they are saying. This is what we got, right? This is what they're saying. You can see clearly this says it's 3%. Well, we proved that was not true. So we reject that. So that's how you solve if it's a two-tailed test. I hope this helped. We did a left-tailed test, we did a right-tailed test, we did a two-tailed test. And so for extra credit, I'm going to have you do a couple of questions. I'm going to have you do the medical researcher. That's going to be one. I'm going to have you also do ADT. That'll be two. Let's see if we can give you a third one. Look at this one. Let's look at this. All right, so we're going to have you do three. So the medical researcher, ADT, and 12. All right, these are the three extra credit quizzes you can do. So please do that and submit them as soon as possible. And the due date is Saturday, so that you can get credit for those three. If you have any questions, feel free to come to office hours, send me a message through Google Chat, or reach out for help via email or other means, right? Hope this was helpful, and I hope you all have a great day, and feel free to watch this again and kind of see where you have areas of questions, concerns or where you need help. Thank you. Bye.